This is Echo Soundworks with Slate Companies. In this video, I'm going to show you guys 3 pro tips that you can use in Anna 2 to get better results with your Supersaw sounds. So this will fit in terms of getting better results with leads, basses, chords, you name it. All right, so the first tip and trick that we're going to check out is using odd voice counts instead of even. Now, this is very helpful when you're creating a Supersaw sound that is going to be upfront, present, and in the center of your mix. So think of a sound like a bass or a lead, right? So like a Reese bass or a detune kind of Supersaw type lead. Now, the reason why is because when you use odd voice counts, you actually have a voice always in the middle of your stereo spectrum or of your mix, essentially, right? If you're using even voice counts, depending on the number that you choose, you might have a hole in the middle of the stereo spectrum with that sound. Now, that can be a good thing with maybe pads and some Supersaw chords, but with a lead and a bass, sometimes it eats a hole in your mix and makes it harder to mix that sound. So let's check this out. I have a basic chord progression I played in, and we have our default patch in Anna 2 loaded up. All right, so let's take this to 2 voices. Now, this isn't entering the Supersaw territory yet, but you'll hear that there are multiple voices, and you can pretty easily tell that there's nothing really going on in the center, right? It's just a voice is out to the left and a voice is out to the right. Now, if we go to 3 voices, there's a pretty noticeable difference. You'll hear a voice in the center. It's just a stronger, more present sound. So with 3 voices, there's 1 voice on the left, 1 in the center, and 1 voice on the right. Now, if we go to 5, same thing. There's going to be 1 voice in the center, and then the other 4 voices are spread out. 2 on the left, 2 on the right. And the same with 7 and 9. Now, interestingly enough, the original, the OG Supersaw sound that was pretty much pioneered by Roland in the late 90s in a hardware synth, it used 7 voices. So that's a cool tip and trick that you can use when you're working with Supersaw sounds to get more mono compatibility and to get them to fit into your mix better, especially when you're trying to create like a bass or a lead sound. All right, so let's check out the second pro tip that you can use to get amazing results creating Supersaw sounds in Anna 2. And that idea is basically, it's pretty simple. It's to create it in steps or stages. It's to leverage all 3 of the oscillators, the wavetable oscillators in Anna 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into oscillator 1, and we're going to select 6 voices. Going to go to the drop-down menu and hit copy to 2, and we're going to crank that up to 8 voices. So now I've created 2 oscillators, 14 voices of unison. Let's go to oscillator 3 and give it just 1 voice. So what this does is it allows me to A, get more voices than I could from a single oscillator, and B, it gives me control over how much detune we hear and how much width we hear. And the reason why I'm using even numbers is because I'm using oscillator 3 as the center of my mix, essentially, or to represent the center of my stereo field. So if we go into our oscillator mix, which I already have selected, and I solo oscillator 3, right, it's just a single saw voice. But oscillators 1 and 2, those are 6 and 8 voices. And you don't have to change the voices. We could go back to oscillator 2 and select 6 voices. So now we have 12 voices plus this one, so we have 13, right? Now we can do some cool things with this, and we can start to stack and kind of extrapolate even more unique ideas from this technique of building your Supersaw in stages. So right now, this is a pretty cool sound. Right, obviously you could mess around with the detune and the width, but let's see what happens when we pan oscillator 1 out to maybe -20, and we'll pan oscillator 2 out to +20. So now we're spreading it out in the stereo field independently from our center voice. All right, so that's a pretty cool sound in and of itself. We can take this idea a step further. We can keep, like I mentioned before, we can keep expanding on this. So we're creating it in steps, we're creating it in stages. Now, what we can do is we can actually detune these oscillators against themselves with fine tuning. Now, this would be how you would create, say, a a detuned saw sound before the Supersaw was invented. So let me copy this patch. And what I'm going to do is initialize this patch. So back in the day, if you wanted to create a detuned saw sound, you'd have to use multiple actual oscillators. You wouldn't be able to use a Supersaw virtual oscillator, right? So for instance, if I have oscillator 1 being a saw sound, I would change my fine tuning. We'll copy this to oscillator 2. And we'll pitch this up to maybe +5. So we can apply a similar idea to our Supersaw sound. So let's go back and paste in our Supersaw sound that we started a couple minutes ago. And let's go into oscillator. We'll go into oscillator 2 and we'll detune this just a couple, -2, +3. And let's turn our detune down just a little bit because this is a different type of detune sound overall. And let's have a listen. All right, and just a quick little side note, if you're getting a little bit of phasing occurring at the attack stage of the sound, you can go into your individual oscillators and change the phase percentage. This will basically trigger the saw sound from a slightly different point within the waveform, and it can reduce this kind of phasey effect you can get at the start of the sound. Now, this is especially useful when you're working with a Supersaw sound that's multiple oscillators that's using the same waveform. But let's move on now to the third pro tip in this video. And I think this is the most important one, and I've saved the best for last for sure. So up until this point, we've been using the same waveform in each oscillator. Let's change that up. So let's go into oscillator 1 and choose a different saw waveform. So let's go to the Slate Digital folder. We're going to go to the Slate Basics, and we're going to choose one of my favorite wavetables. It's the Saw Reese. Now, this is a really special wavetable because you can actually create a unison detuned sound, a Supersaw sound, using one voice. Check this out. So let's turn the voices down to 1, and let's solo the oscillator. That doesn't sound like anything special, and it certainly doesn't sound like a Supersaw sound, but check this out. So what I'm going to do is go to my G envelope. We're going to double click to create a point, drag up to create a triangle, hit X, and we're going to click our drop down menu, go to oscillator 1 and choose the oscillator 1 morph. And then let's select loop and retrigger, and let's change the rate. So it sounds like we have a super mono compatible sounding Supersaw, and that's just with one voice. Let's crank this back up to 6 voices. Now, the reason I'm doing this is it allows me to get a more unique overall sound for the Supersaw sound, and you can stack different types of waveforms together. Some of them could be analog, they could be digital in nature. Some of them could even lean more towards another type of waveform. It could be kind of squarish sounding. It could be something like a Supersaw meets a super square. So there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of creative freedom you have in Anna 2 to do that. All right, so that's going to sum up this video. If you guys have any questions or comments, post those below. If you guys want to see more great Anna 2 videos like this, please hit that like and subscribe button. All right, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.
Anna 2 is available in the Slate Digital All Access Pass, which gives you thousands of dollars worth of award-winning plugins, the industry's most game-changing synthesizer, Anna 2, and the very best masterclass production courses taught by the industry's biggest pros, all for $14.99 per month.